My wife looked me in the eyes and said, "If you get on that plane, don't bother coming back." I had waited 11 years for this opportunity. 11 years of rejections, failed applications, watching everyone around me leave while I stayed behind. And the moment my dream finally arrived, she gave me an ultimatum that shattered everything I thought I knew about love, sacrifice, and what it really means to build a life for your family. I thought I was choosing our future. She thought I was choosing to abandon her. And the truth, the real truth, was something neither of us was ready to face. What happened after I landed in America changed me in ways I still don't have complete words for. I lost things I didn't know I had. I found things I didn't know I needed. And I came face to face with a version of myself that 11 years of dreaming had never prepared me to meet. This is not a success story. It's not a failure story either. It's the story of the price I paid, and who actually paid it with me, without ever being asked. My name is Samar, and this is the most honest thing I have ever said out loud. I still remember the exact moment my life split into two. It was a Tuesday evening in October, the kind of evening where the air in Delhi carries that first hint of winter. Not cold enough for a sweater, but cool enough to remind you that something is about to change. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at my laptop screen, reading the same email for the fourth time, because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Dear Mr. Samar Oberoi, we are pleased to offer you a position as Senior Software Engineer at Novatech Solutions, Sunnyvale, California. Sunnyvale, California. The words looked like something from a dream I'd been chasing for 11 years. 11 years of late nights studying. 11 years of failed visa applications, rejected interview rounds, and conversations with my father where he would pat my shoulder and say, "Beta, your time is coming." 11 years of watching friends leave for the US while I stayed behind, telling myself that my moment would arrive. And there it was. My moment. I called Tara into the kitchen. She was in the other room helping our daughter Ananya with her homework. Our little girl was 7 years old and obsessed with drawing birds in her notebook. I can still hear the sound of her pencil scratching the paper. I called Tara's name softly, and she came in wiping her hands on her dupatta, looking at me with those eyes that had always known me better than I knew myself. "What happened?" she asked immediately. She could always read my face. I turned the laptop toward her. She leaned down and read. I watched her expression carefully, the way her eyebrows lifted at first, then slowly came back down. She straightened up. She didn't say anything for a long moment. "Sunnyvale," she finally said. Not a question, just the word, hanging in the air between us. "It's what we always talked about," I said carefully. She looked at me then, with an expression I had never seen on her face before, something between grief and anger, held together by a kind of terrible control. "You always talked about it, Samar," she said quietly. I listened. I didn't know what to say to that, because she wasn't entirely wrong. The America dream had always been mine. Tara had supported it. She had never told me to stop trying, but it was my obsession, not hers. She had built her own world in Delhi. Her family was here. Her friendships, her work as a school teacher, the neighborhood she had grown up in and never really wanted to leave. She was rooted in a way I had never been able to be, and I think I had always told myself that if I ever got the opportunity, she would simply uproot herself and follow me. I had never really stopped to ask her if that was true. That first night, we didn't fight. We just talked, or tried to. I told her about the salary, the visa sponsorship, the growth opportunity. She listened carefully and asked practical questions about Ananya's schooling, about housing costs, about how far California was from anyone we knew. The conversation was almost painfully reasonable. We went to bed without raising our voices. I thought that meant we were going to be fine. I was wrong. The next 2 weeks unfolded like a slow unraveling. Every day, the topic would resurface. Not always directly, but it was always there, underneath every conversation, every meal, every moment of silence between us. Tara started mentioning her mother more often. Her mother was in her late 60s, living alone since Tara's father had passed 2 years earlier, and Tara visited her every Sunday without fail. "Who will go to her house on Sundays?" she asked one evening. "You think I can just video call her and that's enough?" I told her we could save money and bring her mother to visit. I told her we could fly back for emergencies. I told her that thousands of Indian families managed long-distance arrangements and survived it. Every practical answer I gave, she would nod slowly, as if adding it to a list she was building in her mind, a list of all the reasons this was wrong. And then, on a Wednesday evening about 2 weeks after I received the offer letter, Tara sat down across from me at the kitchen table and said the words I had never imagined hearing from her mouth. "Samar, if you go to America, I am going to file for divorce." The air left the room. I remember the ceiling fan was running. It always ran, even in October, because Tara preferred it, and the sound of it suddenly felt very loud. "What?" I said. My voice came out strange, like it belonged to someone else. "I have thought about this very carefully," she said. Her voice was steady, but I could see that her hands, resting on the table, were trembling slightly. "I cannot do what you are asking me to do. I cannot take Ananya away from everything she knows. I cannot leave my mother. I cannot rebuild my entire life in a country I don't know, where I have no friends, no family, no foundation. I have tried to imagine it, and I cannot, and I will not spend years being a wife on a video screen. Tara, let me finish." She took a breath. "I am not saying this to punish you. I am not saying this because I don't love you. I am saying this because I know myself. I will become a ghost of who I am if I go there, and I will resent you for it. And eventually, whatever love is left between us will die anyway. So I am telling you now, before that happens, if you choose America, you are choosing it without me." I sat there and I could not speak. I am not a man who cries easily. My father raised me in that old-fashioned way, where men absorb pain silently. But that night, I felt something break open inside me that I didn't know how to close. "You're asking me to give up everything I've worked for," I finally said. "I'm asking you to choose between your dream and your family," she said. "And I understand that is painful, but that is the truth of our situation, and I would rather speak the truth now than watch us fall apart slowly over 3 years of distance." I wanted to be angry. I tried to find the anger. It would have been easier than what I was actually feeling, which was a kind of desperate, suffocating grief. Because here is the thing about Tara that I had always known. She did not say things she did not mean. She was not a woman who used words as weapons or threats. When she said something, she had already lived with it for a long time before she spoke it out loud, which meant that this ultimatum, was not impulsive. She had been sitting with this for 2 weeks, maybe longer, and she had arrived at it the way she arrived at every serious decision, carefully, painfully, and completely. That night, after Ananya was asleep, I walked out to our small balcony and stood there, in the October air, looking at the street below. Our neighborhood in Saket was quiet at that hour. A dog barking somewhere in the distance, the glow of a television through a neighbor's window, the sound of a scooter passing on the road below. I had grown up in this city. I had married in this city. My daughter had been born in a hospital 8 kilometers from where I was standing. And somewhere thousands of miles away, there was a job waiting for me in a place I had never been, in a country I had only ever seen in movies and read about in LinkedIn posts from people who had made it. I stood on that balcony for a long time. I thought about my father, who had worked his whole life in a government job that never paid him what he deserved, who had died at 62, still talking about what he could have done if he had gotten one real opportunity. I thought about the version of myself that took this job and built something real. I thought about Ananya growing up and asking me someday why I had stayed when I had a chance to change everything. And then I thought about Tara's hands trembling on the kitchen table. I went back inside without any answers. I lay down beside my wife in the dark, listening to her breathe, not knowing yet what I was going to do, only knowing that whatever I chose, I was going to lose something I could never get back. The visa appointment was in 3 weeks. I had 21 days to decide. Those 21 days were the longest of my life. I want you to understand what it feels like to wake up every morning with a decision sitting on your chest like a stone. You open your eyes, and for one brief, merciful second, you don't remember. And then it comes back, all of it. And the day begins with that weight already pressing down on you before you have even had your first cup of chai. Tara and I did not talk about it again directly. We had entered into a kind of silent agreement. We would be normal for Ananya's sake. We would eat together. We would help with homework and watch television in the evenings and say goodnight to each other. But underneath all of it, the ultimatum lived. It sat between us at the dinner table. It rode with us in the car on weekends. It was in every glance she gave me and every moment I looked away. My best friend Vikram was the only person I told. We had known each other since engineering college in Pune, and he had moved to the US himself 8 years earlier. He was in Seattle, working for a company that had made him comfortable enough to buy a house and send his kids to good schools. I called him the day after Tara gave me the ultimatum, and I told him everything. He was quiet for a long time after I finished. "Yar," he finally said, "I'm not going to tell you what to do. But I will tell you this. I know 3 people who gave up their US opportunities for their marriages. 2 of those marriages ended anyway. One man is still in Delhi, still telling himself he made the right choice, but every time I talk to him, I can hear something dead in his voice. That's a terrible thing to say," I told him. "You called me for honesty, not comfort," he said. "But I also know people who came here and lost their families in the process. Men who rebuilt everything professionally and came home one day to find that their wives had become strangers. So I don't have an easy answer for you. Nobody does." I hung up and sat alone in my car in the parking lot of my office building for 40 minutes. I started doing something during those 3 weeks that I am almost embarrassed to admit. Every night, after Tara fell asleep, I would take out my phone and read stories online, forums, Reddit threads, YouTube comments, from Indian immigrants in the US. I was looking for something. I don't know exactly what. Maybe permission, maybe warning, maybe just evidence that other people had stood at this same crossroads and survived. What I found was both reassuring and terrifying. There were men who had come alone, suffered through years of loneliness and difficult paperwork, and eventually brought their families over, and their wives had adapted and even thrived. There were also men who had come alone and watched their marriages decay through screen calls and misunderstandings and the slow, invisible growing apart that happens when 2 people stop sharing the same physical world. Distance, I began to understand, does not pause a relationship. It accelerates whatever is already happening inside it. If your foundation is strong, distance tests it, but does not destroy it. If your foundation has cracks, distance finds every single one of them. I lay awake at night asking myself, what was the foundation of my marriage? I believed we loved each other, but love, I was beginning to understand, is not a single thing. It is 1,000 small daily acts. The way you hand someone their coffee without being asked, the way you notice when they are tired, the way you occupy the same physical space and let that proximity do its quiet work. How much of what Tara and I had was built on that physical closeness? What would remain when you removed it? 10 days before the visa appointment, my mother called me. She was in Jaipur, where I had grown up. My parents had lived there their whole lives. My father was gone, but my mother still lived in the same house where I had learned to ride a bicycle in the courtyard. She called me every Sunday, but this was a Wednesday, which meant she had heard something. "Tara called me," she said without any preamble. I closed my eyes. "When?" "Yesterday. She told me about America. She told me what she said to you." I didn't know what to say. "Some are." My mother's voice was careful, in the way it only ever got when she was carrying something heavy. "Your father wanted to go to the Gulf in 1987. There was a construction company, good money, 2 years of work. He would have come back with enough to buy our own house instead of renting. I told him no. I was scared. I was 28 years old, and I was scared of being alone with 2 small children, and I said no." I had never heard this story before. "He didn't go," she continued. "He stayed, and he never said a word about it. Not once in 30 years did he make me feel guilty. But Beta, I watched him. I watched the way he would sometimes go quiet when we talked about money problems, the way he looked at people who had built things. He was a good man, and he loved me, and he stayed. And somewhere inside him, a small part of him always wondered." She paused. "I am not telling you to go. I am telling you that the people who love us sometimes carry the cost of our fears. I carried that for 30 years. I am only telling you. Know what you are asking Tara to carry, and know what you might carry yourself if you stay. I put the phone down and sat in silence for a very long time. 7 days before the appointment, something happened that I had not expected. Ananya got sick. Nothing serious. A fever and a cough that kept her home from school for 2 days. I took time off work to stay with her while Tara was teaching. I sat with my daughter on our bed, watching cartoons, bringing her warm soup, pressing a cold cloth to her forehead when the fever spiked in the afternoon. At one point, she looked up at me with her large, serious eyes and said, "Papa, are you going somewhere far?" My heart stopped. "Why do you ask that?" "Mama was crying in the kitchen last night," she said, with the devastating honesty of a 7-year-old. "She thought I was sleeping, but I heard her. I pulled her close and held her and told her not to worry, that everything was going to be fine." The automatic words that parents say when they have no idea if anything is going to be fine at all. She seemed satisfied with that and went back to her cartoon. But I sat there, holding her small, warm body against mine, and I felt the full weight of what this decision really was. This was not just about me and Tara. This was about her. 3 days before the visa appointment, I made my decision. I booked my flight. I told myself I was doing it for Ananya's future. I told myself that a year of difficulty could become a foundation for a lifetime of stability. I told myself that Tara's fear was real, but that fear is not the same as truth. That people fear the unknown and then discover they are stronger than they imagined. I told myself these things because I needed to believe them. What I did not tell myself, what I refused to look at directly, was the simpler and more painful truth underneath all the reasoning. I did not know how to let go of this dream. I had carried it for 11 years. It had become part of the structure of my identity. To give it up felt like amputating something. Not just a job offer, but the version of myself that I had been promising to become for over a decade. I was 37 years old. If not now, when? I told Tara the night before the visa appointment. I sat her down after Ananya was asleep and I said, "I'm going, Tara. I have to go, but I am going for us. For Ananya's future. For the life I want to build for this family. I am asking you to give me 1 year, just 1 year, and I promise I will do everything to bring you both there, or I will come back, and we will figure out something else together." She looked at me for a long moment. "I told you what would happen," she said quietly. "I know. So you have made your choice." "I'm choosing our future," I said. "I know you don't see it that way right now. I'm asking you to trust me." She nodded slowly. Not agreement, not forgiveness, just acknowledgement. She got up and went to the bedroom without another word. I slept on the couch that night. The visa was approved the following morning in less than 40 minutes. The officer stamped my passport and said, "Have a good trip." I walked out of the embassy into the October sunlight, holding my passport with the fresh H-1B stamp inside, and I stood on the pavement outside and waited to feel something that resembled joy. Instead, I felt the beginning of a fear I had no name for yet. I had 11 days until my flight. The flight from Delhi to San Francisco is roughly 17 hours. I know this because I counted them. Not in the way you count hours when you're excited and watching the flight map obsessively, willing the little airplane icon to move faster. I counted them the way you count the minutes in a waiting room. Slowly, painfully, with nothing to do but sit inside your own thoughts and feel the distance growing behind you. Tara had come to the airport. I want to be honest about that, because when I tell this story, I think people expect her to have stayed home, to have made her point through absence. But she is not that kind of woman. She came with Ananya, and she stood in the departure terminal in a blue salwar that I had always loved on her, with Ananya holding her hand, and she hugged me before I went through security. It was not a cold hug. That almost made it worse. She held me the way she had always held me, her face pressed against my shoulder, her arms tight around my back, and I could feel that she was trying to memorize something. When she pulled back, her eyes were dry, but only barely. Ananya hugged my legs and said, "Bring me something from America, Papa." 7 years old, completely unaware of the tectonic plates shifting underneath her world. "I will bring you everything," I told her. My voice broke on the last word. I covered it, by lifting her up and pressing my face into her hair, breathing her in. That particular smell of a child's head, warm and clean and completely irreplaceable. I handed her back to Tara. Our eyes met for one moment. "Call me when you land," she said. "I will." And then I walked through security, and I did not look back, because I knew if I looked back, I would not be able to keep walking. Sunnyvale in November is nothing like what I had imagined. When Indians think of California, we think of sunshine and blue skies and the golden landscapes from American movies. What I found when I arrived was a gray, overcast sky, temperatures that hovered around 12 degrees Celsius, and a rental room in a shared house that smelled faintly of someone else's cooking. My company had helped me find temporary housing. A room in a house shared by 4 other people, all of them tech workers, none of them from India. There was a German named Klaus who worked at Google and kept very precise schedules, an American named Derek who played video games until 2 in the morning, a quiet Chinese woman named May who I barely saw for the first 2 weeks, and a Brazilian named Rafael who was the only one who ever knocked on my door just to see if I wanted company. The room was clean and adequate. It had a bed, a small desk, a window that looked out onto a narrow strip of backyard. I unpacked my 2 suitcases in about 30 minutes, and then sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the 4 walls around me and thought, this is what 11 years of dreaming looks like. It looked very small. The first call with Tara happened the morning after I arrived. Evening in Delhi, morning in California, the 12-and-a-half-hour time difference already beginning to shape our lives in ways I hadn't fully prepared for. She looked tired on the screen. Ananya was in her school uniform, ready to leave. "How is the room?" Tara asked. "Good," I said. "Clean. The house is decent." She nodded. There was a pause. "Did you eat?" "I had something on the flight." Another pause. We had spoken every day for 15 years. Dated for 2 years, married for 13, and now we were struggling to fill 30 seconds. "Ananya has a school program next Friday," she said. "She's practicing a dance." "I'll call to watch," I said immediately. "Just make sure you have your phone." I know how to hold a phone. Samar. It came out sharper than she probably intended, or maybe exactly as sharp as she intended. The silence after it had a texture. "I'll let you know the time," she said finally, in a more neutral voice. We said goodbye. After the screen went dark, I sat with my phone in my hands for a while. There was something I had not been prepared for, something none of the immigration forums or the YouTube testimonials had adequately described. It was not loneliness exactly, or not only loneliness. It was a specific kind of disorientation that comes from suddenly existing outside of your own context. In Delhi, I was Samar Oberoi, someone's husband, someone's father, someone's friend, the person who knew which street vendor made the best chat in his neighborhood, the person whose building security guard knew his face and nodded every morning. Here I was, nobody. Here I was a name on an H-1B visa, a new employee ID badge, a stranger in a house full of strangers in a city that did not know I existed. The self, I discovered, is surprisingly dependent on other people recognizing it. Work began on a Monday. Novatech Solutions occupied 4 floors of a glass building in the middle of a corporate park that looked identical to every other corporate park I had seen in photographs. Wide, clean roads, perfect lawns, low buildings with reflective windows, an atmosphere of efficient productivity that had been carefully designed to feel neither welcoming nor hostile, just neutral, functional. My team was international in the way that Silicon Valley teams always are. People from India, China, Eastern Europe, Latin America, with a handful of Americans distributed throughout. My manager was a calm, precise man from Hyderabad named Suresh, who had been in the US for 14 years. On my first day, he took me for coffee in the building cafeteria and gave me what I would later understand was his standard speech for new Indian hires. "The first 3 months are the hardest," he said. "You will question everything. You will wonder why you came. You will call your family, and the calls will feel wrong. You will feel successful and miserable at the same time, and that combination will confuse you. Has it gotten easier for you?" I asked. He thought about this for a moment with genuine seriousness. "Different," he said finally. "It gets different. Whether that is easier depends on what you were before. He said it without sadness, just as a fact. It was perhaps the most honest thing anyone said to me in my first month in America. The calls with Tara settled into a pattern over the following weeks, and patterns, I was learning, can be a form of distance masquerading as connection. We spoke every night, my evening, her morning, for between 15 and 30 minutes. We talked about practical things, whether I had found a better grocery store, how Ananya's school program had gone, whether I needed anything sent from home, whether I had sorted out my social security number paperwork. We spoke about logistics. We rarely spoke about anything else. There were things I wanted to say that I could not find the words for. I wanted to tell her that I sometimes sat in my car in the Novatech parking lot after work for 20 minutes because I wasn't ready to go back to the rented room and that I didn't fully understand why. I wanted to tell her that I had started keeping a small photo of her and Ananya propped against my laptop screen, and that sometimes I would look at it while I was in meetings, just to remind myself why I was sitting in a glass building in California. I wanted to tell her that the technical work was good, genuinely good, challenging and well-resourced in ways that my Delhi job had never been, but that being good at my job felt strangely hollow when there was no one at home to tell about my day. I said none of these things, because saying them felt like admitting weakness, and admitting weakness felt like proving her right. What I did not know was that Tara was having her own silence on her side of the world. It was Rafael, my Brazilian housemate, who first noticed something was wrong with me. He was the kind of person who paid attention to people, genuinely, naturally, without any agenda. One Saturday morning, about 6 weeks after my arrival, he found me sitting in the kitchen at 7 in the morning, staring at a cup of chai that had gone cold, and he sat down across from me and said, in his accented English, "You look like a man who is very far from where he wants to be." I looked up at him. "Isn't that true of everyone here?" I said. He laughed, a warm, open laugh. "Yes, but most people pretend better." He poured himself coffee and sat back down. "Your wife?" he asked simply. I nodded. "She did not want you to come." I gave him the short version. He listened without interrupting, which is rarer than it sounds. "My mother told me not to come to the U.S., he said when I finished. "She said Brazil needs its people. She said I was abandoning my family for dollars." He turned his coffee cup in his hands. She was not wrong, but she was also not completely right. These things are never one thing, you know. They are always two things at the same time. My wife said if I came, she would file for divorce. I said. It was the first time I had said the word divorce out loud to anyone since Tara had said it to me. Raphael was quiet for a moment. "And did she?" "Not yet," I said. "But it has only been 6 weeks." He nodded slowly. Then he said something I have thought about many times since. "The question is not whether she files the papers, my friend. The question is whether the two of you are already living as if she has." I sat with that for a long time after he went back to his room. It was in the 8th week that Tara told me something that changed everything. We were on our nightly call, going through our usual careful exchange of practical information, when she went quiet for a moment. A different kind of quiet than our usual silences. "Samar," she said, "there is something I need to tell you." Something in her voice made my stomach tighten. "What is it?" "My mother had a small stroke last week." The words landed like a physical blow. "What? When? Why didn't you—" "She is okay," Tara said quickly. "She is stable. The doctors say it was minor, but Samar—" Her voice, which had been steady, fractured slightly on my name. Just slightly. "I was alone. I was completely alone when it happened. I got the call at 2 in the morning, and I had to call a neighbor to sit with Ananya, and I drove to the hospital by myself, and I sat in the emergency waiting room for 4 hours by myself, and She stopped. I could hear her breathing. "Tara, I am not saying this to make you feel guilty," she said, pulling her voice back under control. "I am saying it because I need you to know what alone actually looks like. Not the idea of it. The real thing." I was gripping my phone so hard my knuckles were white. "I'm coming home," I said immediately. "I'll book a flight. Your mother is fine, Samar. I told you. She is stable. You don't need to come home for this. I'm not coming home for this. I'm coming home for you." Another silence. And in that silence, I heard something I had not heard from Tara in a very long time. She started to cry. Not the controlled, dignified tears I had seen at the airport. Real crying, quiet and exhausted and completely unguarded. The sound of someone who has been holding themselves together for 8 weeks and has just run out of the strength to keep doing it. I booked the flight that night. The flight back to Delhi felt nothing like the flight to San Francisco. 17 hours in the opposite direction, and every single one of them felt like it was pulling me towards something rather than away from it. I sat in my seat with the window shade open for most of the journey, watching the darkness over the ocean give way slowly to the pale colors of a new morning somewhere over Central Asia. And I thought about Tara sitting alone in a hospital waiting room at 2 in the morning. And I felt a shame so deep and so quiet that it had no edges I could find. I had told myself I was going to America for my family. I had repeated that sentence so many times in my own mind that it had started to feel like truth. But somewhere over the Arabian Sea, in the thin grey light of early morning, I finally let myself look at it honestly. I had gone to America for myself, for the dream. For the version of Samar Oberoi I had been promising to become since I was 26 years old. Tara and Ananya were the reason I had given myself permission to believe it was noble. But they were not the reason I had gone. I was the reason I had gone. And there is nothing wrong with that, except that I had not been honest enough to admit it, even to myself. Honesty, I was learning, has a way of arriving late and charging interest. Tara was not at the airport when I landed. She had offered to come, and I had told her not to. Her mother was still recovering, and Ananya had school, and I could manage an airport taxi perfectly well after navigating San Francisco International by myself. But as I came through the arrival gates into the familiar chaos of Indira Gandhi International, the noise, the crowds, the smell of the city even inside the terminal, I felt the absence of her sharply. For 13 years, she had been the person on the other side of every arrival. Even on short work trips, she would be there with Ananya, both of them searching the faces coming through the doors. The taxi ride to our apartment in Saket took 40 minutes in the morning traffic. Delhi in December has a particular quality, the winter fog sitting low over the city, the air sharp and cold, the streets still carrying that particular intensity that no other city in the world sounds quite like. I had been away for 8 weeks. It felt longer. Cities change when you are not in them, or perhaps you change, and the city simply stays itself. And the difference between those two things is what you feel when you return. Our building's security guard, an older man named Ramesh, who had worked the gate for as long as we had lived there, saw me coming with my suitcase, and his face broke into a wide smile. "Samar Sahib, up agay. You've come back." 3 words. The simplest possible welcome, and yet something in my chest loosened at the sound of them in a way that 8 weeks of Sunnyvale professional warmth had never managed. "Han, Ramesh Bhai," I told him. Yes. I went upstairs and knocked on my own front door because it felt wrong to simply use my key, and Tara opened it. She was in her house clothes, the comfortable old cotton salwar she wore on weekends, her hair pulled back, no makeup. She looked tired. Not broken, not defeated. Tara has never been either of those things, but tired in the deep, structural way that comes from carrying too much for too long without adequate rest. We looked at each other for a moment in the doorway. "You didn't have to come," she said, but her voice said something different. "I did," I said. She stepped aside to let me in. The apartment smelled like home. Her mother's recipe for dal on the stove, Ananya's drawings covering one wall of the living room, the particular combination of familiar things that no other place in the world smells like. I set my suitcase down and stood in the middle of the living room and just breathed it in. And I think that was the moment I understood something I had not been willing to understand before. Home is not a place. It is a specific arrangement of people and small daily things that cannot be replicated anywhere else on earth. You can find comfort in other places. You can find success. You can find challenge and growth and professional fulfillment. But the thing that home is, that particular irreplaceable thing, cannot be rebuilt from scratch in a rented room in Sunnyvale, no matter how good your salary is. Ananya will be so happy, Tara said from the kitchen, her voice carefully neutral. Where is she? School. She gets out at 3:30. I sat down at the kitchen table. The same table where Tara had told me she would file for divorce. The same table where I had read the Novatech offer letter. And I watched her stir the dal, and I said, I'm sorry. She kept stirring. For which part? It was a fair question. For not listening, I said. For deciding that I knew better than you what was right for our family. For leaving you alone with everything and calling it sacrifice. She turned around then and looked at me. Her expression was complicated. Relief and pain and something that had not quite decided yet what it wanted to be. I don't want an apology, Samar, she said quietly. I want to know what you are actually going to do. I stayed in Delhi for 12 days. I had told my manager Suresh that it was a family emergency, which was true, though the emergency was not only Tara's mother's health, but the health of something far more fundamental. Suresh, who had been in America for 14 years and understood certain things without needing them explained, told me to take the time I needed. Those 12 days were the most honest conversations Tara and I had ever had in our marriage. We talked about things we had been avoiding for years, not just about America, but about the architecture of our life together, about the decisions we had each made silently and alone and presented to each other as facts, about the ways we had stopped asking each other certain questions because we were afraid of the answers, about the strange, slow erosion that happens in a marriage when two people are busy and tired and assume that love is enough of a foundation without continuous maintenance. Tara told me things I had not known, that she had felt for years, like the supporting character in the story of my ambition. That every conversation about America had felt to her like a reminder that where she was, who she was not quite enough, not quite the right setting for the life I actually wanted. That the ultimatum she had given me had not been a weapon. It had been the first honest thing she had said to me in years, and saying it had terrified her as much as it had terrified me. I told her things I had not admitted to myself. That the 8 weeks in Sunnyvale had been the most professionally stimulating and personally desolate period of my adult life. That the work was good, and the opportunity was real, but that I had discovered something about myself that I had not expected. I was not the kind of man who could build a life alone. I had always thought of my need for connection as a weakness, something to be managed while I pursued the real goal. Those 8 weeks had shown me that it was not a weakness, it was simply what I was made of. On the 9th day of my visit, Tara's mother came to have dinner with us. She arrived in a taxi, moving more carefully than before the stroke, but sharp-eyed and warm and completely herself. She sat at our dinner table and ate and asked me detailed questions about California with genuine curiosity. The weather, the food, the people, what Indians there were like, whether the traffic was as bad as Delhi. At one point she looked at me across the table and said, with the directness that older Indian women sometimes have, "You know, my husband once had a chance to go to Bombay for work. Big company, good money." I said yes, immediate. He didn't go anyway, his own reasons, but I have always thought, if a person has a real chance, the people who love him should find a way to support it, not stand in the way of it. She said this without looking at Tara, but it was meant for Tara, and for me. I understood in that moment that Tara's mother, this woman who lived alone on Sundays and had sat terrified in a hospital waiting room, waiting for her own test results, was telling her daughter something important. That love is not the same as holding on. That sometimes supporting someone means finding the courage to be left behind temporarily, and trusting that temporary is not the same as permanent. Tara was quiet for the rest of the evening, but something in her face had shifted. On my last night in Delhi, we sat on the balcony together after Ananya was asleep. The same balcony where I had stood alone 2 months earlier in the October air, trying to make a decision. December was colder, the city spread out below us in its nighttime version of itself, the dog still barking somewhere in the distance, as it always did. Tara spoke first. "I've been thinking," she said, "about what my mother said." "I heard her," I said. "I'm not ready to come to America," she said carefully. "I need you to understand that. I am not ready, and I don't know when I will be ready, and I cannot promise you a timeline. My mother needs me here right now. Ananya is settled in her school. I have my own work and my own life, and I am not willing to abandon all of it on a schedule that suits your visa. I know, I said, but she paused, and in that pause, I held my breath. I don't want you to not go. I have been thinking about what I said, about the divorce, and I think, her voice was careful, measured, working through something in real time. I think I said it because I was frightened, and I am still frightened. But being frightened is not the same as being right. I reached over and took her hand. She let me. 1 year, she said. You finish 1 year. We talk every day. Really talk, not just logistics. You come home for every important thing, and at the end of 1 year, we sit down together and make a decision about what comes next. Together. Not you deciding for us and presenting it to me as a sacrifice. Together, I said. And Samar, she turned to look at me. If at any point it is destroying us, we stop. The dream is not worth more than this. She gestured between us with one hand. Whatever this is, however damaged it is right now, it is still worth more than California. I looked at her in the cold December night. This woman I had loved for 15 years, this woman I had underestimated and overlooked and nearly lost, and I thought about all the things I had been so certain I understood about sacrifice and family and the price of dreams, and I understood that I had been wrong about almost all of it. The price of a dream is not paid only by the person who dreams it. It is paid by everyone who loves them. I flew back to Sunnyvale 4 days later. The room in the shared house was exactly as I had left it. The photo of Tara and Ananya was still propped against my laptop screen. Raphael knocked on my door that evening and asked how India was. And I told him it was complicated and necessary, and he nodded like a man who understood both of those words. That night, I called Tara and we talked for 2 hours. Not about logistics, about everything else. I am still in California. Tara is still in Delhi. We are still married. I will not tell you it is easy, because it is not. I will not tell you the distance has stopped hurting, because it has not. There are still mornings when I wake up in this small room and feel the weight of everything that is not here. There are still calls that end too soon, and silences that carry too much. And moments when the gap between our time zones feels less like 12 hours and more like a distance with no clear measurement. But there is something else now that was not there before. An honesty between us that we had to travel 17,000 kilometers apart to finally find. A willingness to say the difficult thing instead of the comfortable thing. A respect for what each of us is actually carrying, instead of the story we had been telling ourselves about what sacrifice looks like. Ananya starts a new school year in June. Tara has been quietly, carefully, looking at international schools in the Bay Area. She has not said anything definitive, but she has been looking. And some evenings, when the California sun sets in that particular shade of gold that you only see here, the light hitting the hills in a way that is genuinely, undeniably beautiful, I take a photo on my phone and send it to Tara without any caption. She always replies with the same thing: save it for when I get there.